Alrighty, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to our HFS webinar on how a global telecommunications firm scaled RPA. We're really delighted to be talking with you today. This is the person talking. This is Elena Christopher. I'm a research vice president here at HFS. And we're going to be talking with essentially conducting an interview with slides, is how I like to think about it, with Sebastian Zeiss from Deutsche Telekom, as well as Arian van Berkum from Another Monday. I say I'm not a native Dutch speaker, so hopefully I have not butchered Arian's name too poorly. But we're really going to be diving into this topic of scale. We'll talk through a little bit of current HFS research to set up some of the context on that. But what we hear from a lot of the enterprises that we're talking with today is that scale, particularly around RPA and broader intelligent automation, is a major challenge. So rather than spending a bunch of time trying to figure out why it's not happening, we thought we'd go to Deutsche Telekom and Another Monday and really talk about how their program, now 4 years plus on, why it's been working and really what they did, what's their secret sauce. Before we do that, I just want to talk about a couple of quick housekeeping points. If you look at your screen, so we work through Zoom, so at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you should see a little icon box, and there's one that says Q&A. If you click on that Q&A icon, it will bring up this pop-up window like you see shown on the slide here. Please feel free to submit your questions throughout the webinar today. We'll be reviewing them as we're going through, and we'll make sure to save between 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how the conversation is going today, to try and take some of those questions at the end. And so with that, let's talk about what we're going to be covering today. As I mentioned, we'll do a little bit of market context, where we'll look at some of the latest HFS research and really examine what enterprises are telling us about RPA and broader intelligent automation adoption trends and challenges. We'll then dive in to talk about Deutsche Telekom and some of their automation journey. We really like to focus a lot on what we call the why, what, and the how. Why are you embarking on an automation journey? What are you doing to achieve it? And how are you actually executing it? And we'll bring in as a key part of that the role of their partner in their particular automation journey, Another Monday. And then we'll end with some actionable recommendations, really lessons learned through Deutsche Telekom's journey about what it takes to both scale and all importantly, sustain automation programs. And then we'll get to that Q&A. Okay, so let's go through a little bit of data first, just to set the context. So we, HFS, recently in conjunction with KPMG, we just did a pretty sizable study around the world covering a variety of industries and about almost 600 business leaders, including 100 C-level executives. And so right from the top, sort of in line with what I had mentioned, which is always really wanting to make sure we understand why. Why is any enterprise embarking on or contemplating the embracing intelligent automation? And what we've really found is that there's some pretty lofty objectives for the why. I think maybe a few years back when RPA was starting to really, we joke and say when enterprises were starting to understand what RPA stood for, there was a lot of hype around being able to replace people, drive a lot of cost savings. I think that that's really shifted now. What this data shows us is that we'll see strategic objectives on the left. The number one strategic objective for intelligent automation is to drive revenue growth. When we talk a bit about what the operational objectives are, it's very much focused on elements of customer experience, improving customer service, as well as streamlining interaction points. I think the real headline here, aside from what the strategic and operational focus areas are, is what's at the very bottom. Eliminate headcount, as you see, is dead last, literally less than 1%. So there's some, in terms of the why, what's in it for enterprises to be embracing intelligent automation, we've got some pretty lofty objectives. So let's talk a bit about the what, if you will. And this brings us to, from a technology perspective, what are some of the tools that are actually being adopted and how is this going? So there's a lot going on here, so I'll break it down into a few buckets, which firstly, if we look at all of the different technologies we've included here. This is a very broad swath of what at HFS we term intelligent automation tool sets. So I think one of the first takeaways is that enterprises are investing across a lot of different tool sets. So that's point one. And I think just that less than a third of enterprises are really either unsure or have no plans. So really there's just a massive uptake and a massive push for adoption across intelligent automation. But within that though, we look at piloting right now versus moving to production versus scaled up and industrialized. A lot of enterprises are really just getting started with this journey. It's quite piecemeal, if you will, and if I draw your attention to this component here about the relative percentages of enterprises that are scaled up and industrialized, it's quite low. I know if you average this out, it ends up to be about 17% of enterprises really would state that they feel scaled up and industrialized with their intelligent automation journey. And the other thing I'd point out here is that when you look at the bottom of the screen, I did call out the specifics for RPA. RPA is arguably been, we tend to call it the affectionately the gateway drug, but it's where a lot of enterprises have started their automation journey. But it's actually got some of the lowest hit rate for being scaled up and industrialized. Which brings us to the bit of the why is this the case? We know a lot of these technologies are quite nascent, but really what are some of the inhibitors that are getting in the way of enterprises achieving their success? And so what we find somewhat fascinating is what comes out at the top, is that scale is actually what enterprises are citing as their biggest inhibitor to achieving both their strategic and operational goals. We find this interesting because scale in many ways is the scale and inability to achieve it. It's honestly more of an effect than a cause or an actual inhibitor. But we obviously have to take that into account, that this is what enterprises are going through at this point. They're really challenged to achieve scale. We just saw it in that prior slide. I will draw your attention to a couple of these other areas that I think start to get at more of the causes. Some of this uncertainty about what level of financial investment is needed, challenges around the organizational elements, who's leading this, if you will, or if we go down here and we see for these items that there are 1, 2, 3 rank, some of the ones that had very strong showing for a number 1 rank. We have that lack of in-house talent. That's a major issue, particularly for these new change agent technologies. It's just a time game. You have to build up the capabilities, as well as deficiency in overall data quality. This is sort of motherhood and apple pie, but it's very, very real, particularly if you're talking about having the appropriate data to train your algorithms. So there are a variety of challenges out there today that are inhibiting scale. And with this, I'd like to move on to actually get to some of the interview piece, sort of as promised. Well, we've talked a bit and shown a bit about what's going on from an adoption trend standpoint, where the inhibitors are. Now let's turn it over to Deutsche Telekom, Sebastian, and another Monday, Arian, and let's talk a little bit about what you can do to actually mitigate some of these challenges and achieve success. So Sebastian, welcome to the webinar today. I'd love for you to take a moment to introduce yourself and tell us about your role in the company in which you work.
Well, thanks for having me. And well, my role. What you call intelligent automation is what we call at Deutsche Telekom our smart digitization program. So the idea really is, how can we use modern and new technologies to digitize our whole business? And begs the question, what is our business? Well, we are Germany's biggest telecommunications company. We run a landline business, mobile business, TV business, all that. And luckily, we still do have a lot of customers. Alone, 35 million mobile customers and approximately 15 million broadband customers. And that also means we do have a lot of customer interactions. And that's actually where the company I work for, which is the Deutsche Telekom Services unit, which is our service unit at Deutsche Telekom, comes in, because we deal with all these customer interactions we have. And Well, we do have approximately 100 million customer interactions per year. A lot of calls, a lot of letters, and you would be surprised how many handwritten letters we are still getting, and a lot of social media contacts. And that's what we really try to manage, and what we really try to manage as efficient as possible. As you can imagine, having 100 million customer contacts per year with about 30,000 employees is a relevant cost factor for Deutsche Telekom. However, at the same time, we really want to make sure that even so, of course, we want to reduce cost. At the same time, we want to deliver best-in-class customer service. And that's really where I and my team come in, because that's what we really do. We try to use intelligent automation to leverage automation, to really free up resources for things and topics that we really benefit our customers. And well, as described in the chart before, it's really not so much about laying off people, but it's really about getting the people to have the time and the potential to do the right things that really impact our customers. Well, and that's, after all, what I do, and where RPA and intelligent automation has really helped us a lot in the past years.
Super. So thank you for that background, Sebastian. Now, I mentioned in my comments, I know from having had the opportunity to interact with you and learn a bit about your automation journey, you've been roughly going down this path for more than 4 years at this point. But let's go back in time when you were first contemplating automation, I think somewhere in the range of maybe late 2014, when you were thinking about pushing this, setting up a program and pushing it forward. What were you really hoping to achieve? You just mentioned it wasn't so much about laying off people, but you've got this gigantic services business. What really were your objectives that set you on this path?
Well, to be completely frank, back then when we started with automation, one of my roles and tasks was to run the workforce management for our technical services unit. And in technical services, you have 2 key challenges. One is you really have to keep up with SLAs, and the other thing is call amounts and workloads constantly change. If you have like some technical problems in network, one of the momentarily a lot of people will call you, and an hour later probably no one is going to call you anymore because everything is working properly. So you really have a hard time getting the right amount of people that you really need to fulfill the customer demand. So we're really facing the question, how can we become more flexible without having, to hire a lot of people who would have nothing to do for most of the time, and, still be efficient. So that's when we actually stumbled over the whole RPA topic. Because we, aside from calls, we have a lot of, ticket-based activities. And RPA really seemed to be a good option to deal with those ticket-based activities. You're not so much, as I said, about laying off people, but really to become more flexible, even in times of high workload. And that's where we really started, and that's how I really got to RPA.
Interesting. So I hear in that theme, it's the theme that I'm hearing increasingly in the marketplace. It's this idea of you want to do more with what you have and really getting that flexibility. Alrighty then, so where did this really start? So you had a vision, you stumbled upon another Monday along the way. I loved when we were talking, you had showed me this slide and you said, well, we were getting started on this journey when RPA wasn't even called RPA, but maybe you could spend a couple minutes telling us about where did you even start? How did you contemplate moving forward on this journey, and where did and how did another Monday come into the mix?
Oh, that's very true. Back then when we started, RPA was really something that didn't exist in Germany. And the first time I actually read about bots was when I was reading a document about a benchmark meeting we had with another telco. And back then I thought, that robot stuff, that sounds really interesting. And I remember another Monday didn't even have a homepage in English. It was still Dutch, so it was kind of difficult to even get in touch with them. But anyhow, we still decided to do so. And in 2014, that's actually when we started to have an RFP. And surprisingly enough, we had only 4 companies apply to our RFP. Deutsche Telekom wants to do robotics, who is interested. I guess if we would do the same thing nowadays, it would be 20, 30, 40, 50 companies who would get in touch with us. Back then, it was only 4. And well, we quickly figured out that 2 of those 4 really didn't have the capabilities to do what we needed. And well, after the RFP, 2 companies were left, and we actually started to work with those 2 companies. And one of them was Another Monday. And yeah, so when we started, indeed, it wasn't called RPA. We actually created our own name for it. We called it Front-End Assistance. And because we thought it sounded more friendly than calling it bots. I thought, like, you know, if we call it assistant, people will probably like it more. So that's how we started.
Got it. Okay, thank you for some of that background there. Arian, I'd like to pop a question over to you. So Another Monday, you reached out, you prevailed in this RFX situation with Deutsche Telekom, just a great name. So how did you go about this? Was this just a matter of Another Monday selling Deutsche Telekom some software? Here you go, you've got some licenses, have a nice day. I suspect that probably was not at all what happened, but why don't you tell us? How did this all transpire?
Yeah, well, let me first start that the reason we're called Another Monday is because we believe that automation is one of the tools you could actually use to make work much more satisfying. We are always kind of abhorred when we hear abbreviations like "Thank God it's Friday," because that means that the workforce is happy to go home, and we all know that happy employees perform better. So when they're happy to go home, there might be something wrong. And when Deutsche Telekom reached out and told about their challenges, their challenge was not about cost savings. Their challenge was not about how to make it in a certain kind more efficient. It was much more customer focused. And at the same time, it was employee focused to make sure that we actually do something really worthwhile. So we then went in there, and it was this period of time when nobody was really knowing what this was going to cost or what it was going to be. So this is also the moment we decided jointly that an entrepreneurial approach, which means only be paid for success, was very important. So we built up a partnership where it was not about I sell you a license and go away. It was a partnership about we are going to jointly realize tangible results. And because we have tangible results, we both will be financially happy. And it was this kind of partnership that actually has shown why over the period of for now over 4 years, we still have been friends and partners. It means that because we have aligned success, we have aligned goals, we have an aligned mission, we can be much more successful than when you only sell the software. And that's probably one of the reasons why we are so successful together.
Super, thank you for that, Arian. And that's, I think, one of the key elements that you just mentioned there, that aligned objectives is really, really important. Particularly, I mean, going back to sort of the late 2014, or as the slide here shows, in early 2015, when you were embarking on this, you were really covering some new ground. So Sebastian, looking at so you've got sort of a nice time chart up here. And so it's sort of project start, we see the good old reference to the proof of concept, and going through, I mean, really you pick some areas to focus, you executed, and we're obviously having this conversation at the tail end of January in 2019. So congratulations, you obviously convinced your executive team and overall your company to embrace this. If you really think about what were the critical factors that helped you get from POC to production and now to a sponsored program, I mean, what did you ultimately do to firstly convince your executives to fund this, and then to convince perhaps your company to embrace it?
You know, Arian mentioned that we had a true partnership, and there's actually a really key point here, because in the very beginning, Another Monday was actually the greatest partner we could have, because I recall when we were talking to them first time, they said, like, you know, if you want to do a POC, do something that has impact, do something that has business value. And I believe it was actually important that we did it, because if we had just done a very small POC with just some non-impactful process, we wouldn't have convinced anybody. People would have probably said, you know what, you could easily have done that with a macro. You know, that's just, you know, nothing new, nothing special, nothing that we should really invest in. And we probably wouldn't have anything to show off to our finance people in terms of, you know, we actually do something that has impact. So in my opinion, it was really key that the first process that we choose for our POC was complex enough to really impress people, and at the same time had enough volume to actually see some effect in terms of how much workforce we would need for the things we are doing. And those are the things we actually covered. And I have to say, I still, you know, I love to think about that time, because it was just, you know, something that does not happen very often in big companies like Deutsche Telekom. Because back then I went to the board of management, and I showed the results of our POC, and I was not expecting much actually. But after 0 minutes, our CFO was like, you know what, that sounds really great. You should make that big. Please come back in 2 weeks and tell us how you're going to make it big. And it was actually, you know, good, because and tell us how you're going to make it big and what you need to make it big. And that's what we actually did. And then we give an estimation on what we think we can achieve with RPA and how many bots and transactions we think we can do in 3 years. And we told our CFO, if you really think we want to make it successful, then, you know, you need to sponsor a team. We need to make it easy for everyone to work with RPA. That's what is key. Only if it's easy for everyone, people will start working with it. And yeah, then we went back to the board of management and told them the whole story. So it's like, you know, that's what we want to achieve, and that's what we need. That's what, you know, what we should do. And he was like, okay, I trust you guys. Let's do it. Let's get started. And luckily, I have to say, we were always able to really over-exceed expectations. And you know, for most people, when they go to the board of management, talking to the CFO is not such a nice experience. For me, it always has been. And I always went out of the board of management, not like with, you know, that's what you need to do, always with the point of, you know what, you should hire more people and to make it even bigger. So that's how we made it successful. And it is really, I would say, trust into the technology, really believe what it can do, and don't start too small when you start. If you do it for reals.
Do it for reals.
Yeah.
I like that. It's sort of like the concept of I mean, as you stated, it's if you start small, it may stay small, but it seems like you really plan for scale from the get-go. Arian, it sounded like you wanted to add something to that.
Yeah, I wanted to add something like that because Sebastian said it in his introduction in the answer to your question. We see that doing something in the primary process, in the business, and not doing it in a staff department like finance or HR or procurement is where people will really realize the value, because that's where the volume is. And I think that one of the gutsy things Deutsche Telekom did is that they did what most companies don't dare to do, is do it in the client-facing areas and really drive this client expectation. And don't do it as a testing ground in HR, because let's be honest, at the end of the day, that's not where the big numbers are. It was a really gutsy, but in the end, I think it has proven to be a really successful decision from Deutsche Telekom to actually do this at the front line.
Yeah, it's a great point, Arian, and particularly notable because of, I mean, the time frame when you were doing this in Sebastian. I mean, we still say of all the different data that HFS creates and collects, finance and accounting, to your point, Arian, sort of the back office focus, is still the biggest area for RPA automation. We're seeing it spread and expand, but it's really only been perhaps in the last 12 to 18 months that we're seeing a greater push to more of these core customer-focused functions. So I think it's a really great point. I know in some of my conversations with you, Sebastian and Arian, we talked a lot about the technology and setting up a great program, that thinking big mentality. But we know that there's some other elements that need to come into play when you're thinking about growing big. I sort of not being a millennial and been doing this for quite a while, I always think back to just one of the really core truths or elements that are really true in the marketplace, which is you always need that combo of people, process, and technology to be effective. But I know in our talking about that, it's you set up a program, you found a great partner, you focused on something that mattered. But I'd love if maybe you could take a couple of moments and talk about some of the other things that came into play. Culture, for example, and some of the change management that goes with changing the hearts and minds of people, convincing the organization, not just your leadership, that automation is valuable. How did you do that? What are some of these tiles? What do these mean? And how did you execute on this?
Well, first I have to say convincing the leadership was actually very important as well, because at least at Deutsche Telekom, and I suppose that's true for a lot of big companies, the top management is rather risk averse. So they're really not so keen on trying out new things. And so in that sense, aside from what I just mentioned before, having a good team of people who would really, drive automation, it was, I think, really essential that our top management team got, I would say, an incentive to really start investigating the potential of automation. And in that sense, I think it was really important that our CFO did, aside from giving us money to build a team, he also put out targets for automation. He said, like, you know what, you have a new tool now, you have a new team now, and you can work with it or not. It's your choice, but I'm going to give you a target anyhow. And so that really opened a lot of doors. Because I remember before that happened, when we, were talking to department heads about the idea of automation and the idea that they might have potential to do so, what they would constantly tell us is, in our department, certainly not. The things we are doing are way too complex. Maybe next door you might get lucky, but with us, not so much. So that was, what happened at the beginning quite a lot. And having those targets put out really opened a lot of doors because they were really sort of forced to work with us. And so that was, in terms of, top down, a really important factor. And at the same time, the whole bottom up thing was, of course, very important as well. And I would have to add that, in the very beginning, we underestimated it a lot. So because it was really important to show people that they wouldn't lose their jobs if they helped us to automate, to really show them, our idea of automation is not so much to get rid of you, our idea really is to get rid of the work you don't like at all. So we really showed people that we would help them, to give them the freedom and the ability to focus on the things they like instead of the things that really annoyed them. So that was a very important thing in terms of bottom up. And the other thing that was actually important, and you wouldn't think about it in the beginning, was infrastructure. People really had a hard time believing that those bots actually would work reliable. And they said, like, I'm responsible for the business, and what if the bots don't work? What are you going to do now? What are you going to do then? So it was really important to us to build up a very professional infrastructure that would be redundant, and to tell people those bots won't fail. They will just keep working. Don't worry about it. We promise you. And we're going to also show you how and why you can trust us. And the other thing that was really important here was to really build up a professional run team in the very beginning, because we really made sure every time a bot would fail or not work, we would proactively fix the problem. Let those people in the operations department know, you know what, we had a problem, but it's fixed already, so don't worry. So it was very important in building trust that those bots would actually fulfill their promise and live up to what we said. So that was, really key in terms of being successful. And the other thing we really noticed is, if we really want to do automation, we need operations people. We really need the guys in the call centers and in our field force that really know what they do. Not so much process descriptions, but really what's actually happening. And this was a big question for us, was how can we get those people to work with us? And aside from, showing them that instead of taking their jobs, we're going to take the work you don't like away, we also decided to really create career opportunities. The idea really was we created two programs actually. One is called Expert Track, Analyst Track, and the other one is called Developer Track. And we really started to tell people, if you think and if you're up to it, you can become a programmer, you can become an analyst, you can have a career, even so you're just a call center agent at the moment. And that really got people motivated to work with us and to really see opportunity in the whole automation program. So that was also, I think, a very important element in our whole, I would call percolate change story, if you want to say so.
Indeed. I mean, I think a variety of important points. I mean, really going back to your point about planning for scale, but it's again, sort of an old adage, but you have to make sure that you're really addressing the people, the process, and the technology and planning for scale. Arian, sounds like you've got another point to add in.
Yeah, I mean, we are of course now also for some years in this game, and we see that actually what Deutsche Telekom is doing is now fast becoming the best practice. And one of the points I think Sebastian, in some kind of modesty, didn't mention, but it's vital to have the people that lead this robotic program to actually understand what operational management is all about. Because if you're working in a customer care environment, you really need to understand that every second you're not on means that you're disappointing clients. It means that you need to understand that you need to be able to prioritize fast which tasks need to be done first. It is really about understanding that your people are your key asset. And I think that we now see that with more of our clients, but I think that Deutsche Telekom, and especially Sebastian and his team, have really done groundbreaking work. And now we actually see that within Deutsche Telekom, the biggest suggestion engine for processes to automate are the employees themselves. So it becomes kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, which will speed up your transformation and your automation journey significantly if you can harness the collective intelligence of your workforce. And that we really believe that Deutsche has done this tremendously well, and it's one of the pivotal parts in the success they have enjoyed.
Arian, another great add to the conversation, I think, it's that piece of, because we see it, I mean, we've heard that automation anxiety is actually being diagnosed as a real condition where people are scared that robots are going to take their jobs. So to be able to flip that and really, because again, we all know this empirically, that the folks who understand the processes and how the work gets done the best are the ones doing the work. So to have them contribute to the equation is really massively critical. So let's move on now to talk about, so where have you gotten to? So again, 4+ years working together, really on core business processes, customer focused in the customer service space, both contact center as well as field service. Sebastian, I'd love for you to roll this up. What have you been able to achieve over this time thus far? And I'll draw everyone's attention to, there's some pretty interesting sizable numbers at the bottom of this screen that we're gonna decompose a little bit. But let's have you at least take a shot at answering that first. Really, what have you achieved thus far, Sebastian?
Well, yeah, but first let me say what Arian was saying about the self-fulfilling prophecies has been very true for us. When I was, giving an estimation, I was sure after a year we would run out of ideas, probably 1.5 years. And interestingly enough, that hasn't happened yet. Still, people would come to me like every day and be like, you know what? I noticed you have automated this, and if this works, that should also work. So let's, set up a project. So that has been very interesting in the past. And that's something you can also see in the numbers we have right now, or not right now, that's how we ended last year. We managed to have 35 million transactions processed by our bot farm. 35 million transactions, well, what does a transaction mean? A transaction could be something between 1 minute to 45 minutes. So a transaction could be a very easy task, but it could also be a very complex process that we have modeled into our RPA bots. And what is interesting here is that we were almost able to double the amount between 2017 and 2018. So in considering that we were coming from a quite big number already, I thought, and I still think that's quite a success. So I can say we are rather happy with the whole program still, and the lucky thing for us is we still see a lot of potential, because we still believe there's a lot of stuff we haven't tapped in. And given all these new technologies that are emerging at the moment, which is, process mining, AI-based tools that would help to augment our bots, we still see even more potential than we have tackled yet. So I would say pretty happy at the moment. And to give you an idea of what we have been doing, I want to really refer to some use cases. that's the first one you see wholesale problem solving is actually the first use case, and the first one we did this another Monday. And we started, I would say small, with a small process that's the equivalent of like 3, 4, 5 FTE. But we constantly worked our way up, and now we really managed to get 70% of the workforce out of that process, which is really good for us, because instead of doing ticket-based work, all these people are now in our call business and really deal with real customer issues. So you can really see tremendous SLA improvements. Employees are happy because they really didn't like that ticket-based work. Our customers are happy, and everyone is happy. Another thing I would actually love to refer to is I would call it automatic email processing case, which is really the combination of AI and RPA. And what we just do here is we use bots to really feed an AI engine with emails, and we use the bots to really do what the AI engine tells the bot. So the AI tool will let us know what the customer wants, and the bots will do the job. And if I imagine if we had done that with classic IT integration, it would probably have taken us a year or 2 to integrate it. With RPA, it was a 3-month project. And the last example I would like to give on this chart is called Trassendefender, which is probably not a self-explanatory name. But what I really like about this idea is that something really came from the people, from our people on the street. Because sometimes, well, not sometimes, actually quite often, it happens that construction firms damage our infrastructure. Now you have to imagine those construction firms usually employ people who don't speak German, but a lot of times some Eastern European languages. But in any case, they have a really hard time talking to our call center people, letting us know that they actually damage our infrastructure. So, our people came up to us and like, it would be good to have an app that's multi-language that would allow those guys to let us know that they have actually done something to our infrastructure. How can we accomplish this? And then again, it was another design thinking based approach, a 2-month project to really create that app. And another good thing here is everyone likes it. The companies out like it, our people like it, and everyone is happy. And RPA really was a lever here to do it quickly, and to have that time you need between idea and realization limited to just a few months instead of years, or even worse.
Super. So, you've managed to accomplish a lot, Sebastian. I do want to talk about these bot numbers a little bit. First of all, because I think bot numbers can be confusing. We've definitely said, HFS as a company has said a number of times that we tend not to look at bots as the ultimate calculation of scale, just because there's lots of different definitions of bots. And then also bots there definitely should be a concept for bot retirement as well. But I think, Arian, I'd love maybe for you to comment for us and to help educate the audience a little bit about when we think about bots in the Another Monday context and as working for Deutsche Telekom, what's the right way to think about these? And is there a concept of a bot retirement program?
Well, let me first start with what for us a bot is. For us, a bot is a process, a machine that has successfully completed a transaction. So to give you an example, one bot works on a transaction. It can then work after that on another transaction and another transaction. But at the end of the day, we count the number of successfully avoided human minutes. And those minutes we calculate back to FTEs, and that calculates then the number of bots. So for us, it's not about just running a process. It's also, and this is what I meant when I earlier said, it's about joint KPIs. Deutsche Telekom would not be helped by having a lot of licenses that actually do a transaction, but then the transaction is not successful. So when we talk about bots, it's about successfully executed transactions. So it's about really driving results. And it also means that this joint working together is then much more reflected in how you actually remunerate each other and how you actually reward. And it brings also the reason for growing much more logical, but it also makes the process of bot retirement, because if you look at these two really fantastic processes of email processing and the Trassendefender, It's actually when you start using RPA as a bridge technology, as a data and integration tool, it's no longer about one bot, it's about running one process that could actually be a very large number of handlings or transactions, but actually, because you use it in a different way, it's just one bot. So for us, it's about success, it's about process, and this definition, therefore the transaction is so very important, is what it's all about, because transactions means things done for Deutsche Telekom that have been concluded successfully. It's not just about trying, it's about delivering. And I think that's one of the key differentiators in the cooperation between Deutsche and Another Monday. This shared approach, this shared value recognition, these shared goals, the ability and the willingness to invest in totally different things to make things work together and make sure that we get paid when we're both successful, makes that these definitions are much more interesting than just installing a license-based program where at the end you have paid for a license, but you don't really know what you realized. And that's what we are always aiming for. Joint realization, joint success, joint pleasure, joint fun, and then this keeps on growing. And I think that's the most important part. And on the bot retirement, I think Sebastian can tell much better on that. But yeah, we believe that every bot has somewhere, somehow, it will end its work. There will be new work because the IT will pick up. There will be new technology. But it's definitely something you should manage really well. And I think that Sebastian can really tell some interesting insights on that as well.
Thank you, Arjun.
Exactly.
Yeah, Sebastian, let's please.
Yeah, sure. So I would rather call it bot lifecycle management, and I think there's actually a great opportunity in that. At least in Deutsche Telekom, I guess it's also true for a lot of companies, there tends to be a gap between what the users want, what they tell the IT department what they want, and what IT will deliver at the end. And that gap is sometimes quite problematic. And with bots, you actually do have a different approach, because once you have a bot, you have a really good understanding of what you actually need and how it works and what you need to be done. So what we really do is with our IT department, whenever we deploy new systems, when we ever deploy new IT releases, we try to integrate ideas of the bots into the new IT system. And for our IT people, it's really helpful to have that description of how the bot works to get an idea of what they need to program. And so in that sense, I think that lifecycle management is really good and helpful. And the other thing I would like to add is lifecycle management is actually necessary, because the more bots you have, the more complex it gets. And you want to make sure that you have a complexity that's still manageable. And therefore, whenever you decide to grow big on robotics and RPA, you should definitely make sure that you have some kind of idea on how you will be able to retire those bots at some point. And you should really make sure that your IT department gets a good understanding on what you did with the bots, so they actually can work on integrating those functions into your core IT systems. So cool, definitely have lifecycle management.
Yeah, I think it's a key piece of it. And I also appreciate your reference to working closely with IT. And it just underscores the fact that, Sebastian, in your role in your team, you're definitely hailing from the operations perspective. Just on that notion of having the team, you've mentioned the team and now in the context of bot lifecycle management. Can you share with us at all just exactly how big your team is when you talk about growing big? Because there is the very realistic need. As you scale, you of course want to always be doing more with what you have, but how does that translate to your actual team?
So in our case, we have approximately 20 people in our run team, and another 15 people, well, I guess their role is best described as smart digitization experts. So the run team is responsible, obviously, for running the whole bot farm and making sure that it, does what it is supposed to do. And the smart digitization experts are the guys who really translate a business issue into a smart automation or intelligent automation solution.
Super helpful to understand. Sorry, go on, please.
No, I was just going to mention there's also, of course, by now a lot of RPA programmers in our company.
Okay, we'll come back to that skills in just a moment. I'm going to make sure that we have. Go ahead, Arian.
Maybe if I can mention something as well. If you think that this from a retained organization perspective, if you would see RPA and compare it to classical BPO, that means that you're able to run a 35 million transaction business with close to 2,300 FTE with a retained organization of just 20 people. This is one of the other key benefits I think Deutsche Telekom has realized by its approach. Their total cost of ownership of running this large bot farm is very low. And this is one of the key things, as I said before, when you manage this as operational management, you also manage your bots as operational management. And this is a humongous success because it actually means that you manage 2,300 virtual workers with just 20 managers. Everybody should really think on that business case.
Yeah, it's a really, we get asked about that ratio all of the time, and I'll be honest, we have yet to come up with a consistent answer because it's been all over the map. But I mean, that certainly is it's a great point, Arian, and a very compelling ratio. So listen, I want to make sure that we're going to allow to save enough time for questions because we've got loads of interesting questions coming in. But we'll take a couple more minutes to just provide our team of listeners here, participants, some more details. Sebastian, on the prior slide, you gave a variety of interesting examples about various use cases, trying to give us some flavor for really what you've been applying automation to. But I also really wanted to shine a light on what's been your most impactful initiative. And I believe it's this field service app, but would love it if you could take a few moments to give us some detail on this, please.
Oh, absolutely, it is, yeah. And what I really like about our MES app, or could say Swiss Army knife or field service technicians, is that it is really their personal assistant. And what it does is it basically allows our technicians to task a bot with all kind of repairs or other things they previously would have had to call the call center for. And what I really like is that it's not really a classical RPA project, but really the idea here is, I have to actually tell the story, because we were sitting with the Another Monday guys in an office. We were thinking what to do next. And I think one of my people said, what would be cool if our field service technicians had their own bots. And then another one said, yeah, you know what? Why don't we just do it? And that's how the MES app came to life. And, the cool thing is it has all kinds of benefits. Our people really love it. Our people in the field really don't want to miss a MES app anymore. And our call center agents are actually happy they don't have to take all those internal calls anymore because those calls were really rather annoying to them. And our finance people are happy because 80% of the workforce we had previously into those internal call business can now do customer-facing calls. So, it was a win-win-win tool we had. And the good thing about that win-win tool was it was really done quickly, And the pro about the RPA technology here is that we don't have a static app that's just out there. Instead, we do have an app that can be, that can have new functions every day. And what we really do have now is a community of field service technicians that really think about new features that would be helpful. And, they tell us, that's what we need. And then we have some kind of voting, which feature should be next. And then we just integrate it. And that really gives us momentum as well. So that's why that's why I believe MES app is a really good use case and is actually my favorite one.
Interesting. And does that also translate to, or what kind of business benefits does it translate to? You mentioned your customer service reps have to spend less time keying in data, responding to the field techs. Does it also equate to some additional amount of calls maybe your field service technicians make because they don't have to spend as much time keying things in, confirming services back up? What kind of business results?
Well, the field service technicians can spend more time with the customer because they don't have to call a call center anymore. So for them, it saves some time when they're at the customer's home. And for our call center agents, well, to give you a number, before we had the app, we had about 3,000 internal calls from our technicians per day. Now it's only 500. So you can really see there is a lot of business impact here.
Wow, most definitely. Arian, something to add?
Yeah, I think that the most important thing to add here is this is a classical example of being jointly creative. If you really understand the problems of your client and you're both willing to go wild and not have extensive discussion on what's it going to cost, but only talk about the benefit, it becomes something you can easily do together.
Super. I think that that's a nice roundup there. So you may have noticed I just toggled over a couple of slides, but that's because I want to make sure, as I mentioned, to leave some time for Q&A. But before we jump into the Q&A, this whole conversation today has been about putting in place an effective automation program and the steps that you take to really make it scale. So we sort of created this slide throughout our conversation of some of the elements that have been mentioned. So I'll have it up here as sort of a backdrop, but I'd really like to turn this back to first Sebastian and then to Arian, and just to have you bottom line this for us. What's really been, as you've been going and growing this program, keeping that pipeline full? I love your comment about how I really thought we'd run out of ideas, and you're nowhere near that. Now you're starting to bring in other types of facets of intelligent automation to make your program more robust. Really, what do you think some of the secrets are? I mean, what is it that helps you and Deutsche Telekom both achieve and sustain automation at scale?
I think it's... no, Sebastian, please go.
No, start. Don't worry.
Okay. I think that it all starts with trust. And that means that you need to trust each other and you need to be able to share your problems, and then you can actually work on it. The second part is really make sure that you have the same goals. And the third, maybe the other important part is actually to have fun together and to really do it together, and to don't think it's them or us, only think in we. And I think that that's one of the key things we have achieved in this period of working together for now close to 5 years. It has really become a we. And if it's a we, there's no fences anymore you need to kick. You have everything you need. That's what I would consider to be the most important learning.
Thank you for that, Arian. Sebastian, what would you add to that?
Well, actually not much. I mean, all that is what's on the chart is very true and very important. I would also say, and most important is just be bold, you know? Trust in it, be a guerrilla in your own company, get things done, and at the same time, professionalize. And, you know, in Deutsche Telekom, we like to talk about green and blue managers or green and blue topics. Green topics are the innovative topics, and blue topics are the ones that are sort of old school, old business. And if you're going to make RPA successful, you have to do both at the same time. You have to have that innovative part, that idea part, that bold part, you know, the willingness to try out things, and also, you know, accept that you might fail. And at the same time, be blue and, you know, get a professional platform, get a professional run team, and make sure that what you promise will actually happen. So that's what I think is really important if you want to grow big.
Super. And I think even just that concept of having the mentality to focus and assume that what this is all about from inception is going big, because that essentially is another way of saying that you from inception are planning to scale. If you do small things, you have small things. If you think big, you plan big, you execute big, you naturally will have something that's more inclined to scale. Alrighty then, we've got a whole raft of questions that have been coming in. So Sebastian and Arian, let's get ready for some of those. I think just taking it from the top to make sure that we're really delivering clarity to all of our attendees. Sebastian, I'd love for you to just give some quick commentary on, there were a few folks who were asking exactly what process areas has RPA been implemented. And I know when you mentioned that part of the organization you're part of, it's the service organization. But if you could just perhaps give an updated answer to that, just so that everyone's has the same baseline, I think that would be super helpful.
Well, actually, at DT, RPA, I think, is now in every business unit: marketing, sales, technical services, customer service, shared service center. So we, I think, have tried to implement it everywhere, and yes, also as well in field service. That's basically the app example.
Super, okay. And I think part of that, I think it's fair to ask as well, obviously we've been talking with Another Monday today, but across Deutsche Telekom, has it been a consistent implementation, or do you take a very much a multi-vendor tool approach Deutsche Telekom wide? Did you get, Sebastian, did you hear it? I think you might be on mute.
I saw the question was going to Arian. Actually, Another Monday is mainly working in the customer service area. Other areas or other departments are partly using different partners and vendors. But part of the reason for that is that when we started the whole project, we were basically utilizing all the workforce and all the developers Another Monday could deliver. So for the other departments, there was really not much opportunity to really work with them.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful to understand. I think, so getting into a little bit of detail here, I think one of the questions that's come across a couple of times is some of the participants, they want to understand how you've tackled unstructured data in any of your automation projects. Has this been something that you've explicitly looked at and have an elegant solution for? Let us know. I mean, any wisdom to share around how to manage unstructured data in your automation program?
Well, there's two answers to that. The first one is we do sometimes use what we call human-bot interaction. So if there is data sets or information that is just too complex to be handled by a bot, what we would sometimes do is we would have a bot, pre-process something, then send out an email or chat message to an agent, be like, that's what I'm working on. Can you tell me what to do? And then the agent would really tell the bot what to do with the information he got, and then the bot will continue working. So the idea really here is separate easy work from actually the part of work that needs brains. And that's something we have done quite successfully. We also try to use machine learning, or to use that fancy word, artificial intelligence. However, to be completely honest, that's not working as good as you would hope, because sometimes the complexity is just too big for those machine learning algorithms that you would find nowadays, or the amount of time you would need to train the algorithm is much higher than the benefit you get from that. So at the moment, I would say that bot-human interaction is the best thing you can do if you want to work with unstructured data that's very complex.
Got it. Thank you for that, Sebastian. Arian, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that Sebastian is very right. The current maturity of machine learning is not high enough to really drive this as a value. What we, however, do see is if you take an augmented learning approach, which means machine learning but based on the machine-human interaction, you can be faster with a lot less data, and that will probably be the next step. So we think that cognitive intelligence and augmented intelligence will take a big step, but it is all about still making sure that you manage this human-robotic interface as very diligent as possible.
Super, thanks for that. Okay, I think I'm going to push the envelope a little bit, and let's do one or two more because we have just loads of questions that have come in. So we've had a few folks who have asked about your pipeline for processes. Sebastian, you made the great comment about how you thought it'd dry up, it hasn't dried up. But folks would like to understand a bit more about how you really determine what is a good process to go forward with.
Well, I mean, a lot of people rely on matrices and some kind of rational approach to decide whether it makes sense to use a process or not. I have a different take on that. I believe the decision, if it makes sense to automate something, is way too complex than you could actually, decide based on a matrix. So what I do is I rely on my people, on my team, on my smart digitization experts, and they decide if it makes sense to automate something or not, based on how complex it is, if there's something reusable we already have, on the business need, the business impact, and all that. So I think it's really not a good thing, in my opinion, a human decision, not so much a matrix or scoring model-based decision. So, yeah.
And if I might add to that, we have been very much investing in how can you make building of bots as easy and as cheap as possible. So if you make building bots really, really cheap and really easy, we sometimes say somebody from HR should be able to build a bot, then it means that this business case discussion based on the creation cost of the bot is taken out of the equation. So that means that this discussion becomes much more a discussion about, do we want this to be automated or not? It's not a discussion about can we automate it, but do we want it? And this is especially what Sebastian is saying. These are the questions that are best answered by the people that actually understand the process. The role of the process expert requires that they get a much higher mandate than they used to have to make the right decisions to actually decide on something. And this is also something I think Deutsche Telekom has proven, that if you delegate authority, in this case, it actually works.
Really, really great points. I could never disagree with the concept about, you know, you're going to get the best insights from those who really know the process. But then it also brings up I suppose you're hedging your bets on helping to ensure that you're really focusing on ultimately what matters. Again, I suppose going back to what's been a big theme of our conversation today, this real focus on going big. All right, I'm going to ask one last question and then we'll close it down for today. I think there was an important point made. I think Arian, you made it, and Sebastian, you supported it, about the notion of how you're doing a lot of work that's inherently customer facing and core to your business, focusing within customer service and on what the field service techs are doing out there. Is there any level of transparency, or is that even necessary, with your end customers about the role that robotics is playing, or broader intelligent automation is playing in the provision of service to the end customer? What do you think about that?
Well, it depends on how you define end customer. I mean, we have two kinds of end customers, I would say. We do have end-to-end customers, people like you and me, but we also do have wholesale customers, you know. And to our wholesale customers, we actually made it very transparent that we're working with bots. So that was, I think, important to do. To our end customers, we didn't, and I also think it shouldn't matter, because if the end customer would notice that something has been handled by automation or by a bot, then it's automation done wrong. You should only automate things that feel seamless.
Interesting standpoint. Arian, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think that Sebastian is right. I mean, when people have a meaningful interaction with a company, they expect to have a meaningful interaction. And the more and more they have the feeling that they are handled by a machine, the less and less and less the net promoter score will become. And especially a company like Deutsche Telekom, who is in a highly competitive market of telecommunications, especially in the retail market, one of the key areas to win is enhanced customer experience. So customers are smart. They know that's automation out there, but they don't want to have the feeling that they're talking to a bot. They don't want to have the experience of talking to a bot. They want to have the experience that they are actually talking and being helped by somebody in flesh and blood. And this is very important if you design the processes, to always keep in mind for who you are working for, who is the customer and what is the experience that is desired. And that helps a lot.
Super. I think it's a really critical point, Arian. And I know if I put my consumer hat on, I know it does truly boil down to a bit less about who the support's coming to, although perhaps I do have, at least at this point, a higher level of confidence in the so-called flesh and blood, but it is ultimately about making sure, to use your word, Sebastian, that it's seamless. Alrighty, well, we're out of time today. I want to say a big thank you to Sebastian and Arian from Deutsche Telekom and Another Monday, respectively. It's been a great and interactive discussion around the Deutsche Telekom RPA and automation journey, and really what are some of the key elements to make your program successful and scalable and ultimately sustainable. I will make note of the fact that we had a lot of questions come in. We weren't able to get to all of them, but what we will do is we've made note of who they've come from. We'll work at HFS to get answers to all of those and share those with you. Also worth noting, in a few days' time, this webinar will be available for replay. But thank you all so much, and everybody have a great rest of their day.
Thank you.
Pleasure.